Well, if you're planning a move to Alberta but can't quite decide which city might be best for you, then make sure you watch this video all the way to the end to help you decide. We're going to go through Airdrie versus Calgary today so you can make a decision on where will be best for you and your family. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, especially if you're someone who's planning a move here. And now let's get started. Now, although they're only about 10 minutes apart edge to edge, each city absolutely has its own pros and cons. Now, depending on the type of person you are, your job, your family, and your interests, one of them might suit you better than the other. So let's start off with the most obvious point, and that's going to be the population. Now, Airdrie currently has a population of about 80,000 people, so quite a big difference compared to Calgary's nearly 1.4 million people. Now, this can be one that sways you one way or another right off the bat when making your decision. Naturally, being the bigger city, Calgary has a higher density than Airdrie. While Airdrie is around 950 people per square kilometer, Calgary has a density of about 2,200 people per square kilometer, so definitely a bit more dense inside Calgary. So definitely of the two, Airdrie is going to give you a bit more breathing room and less people than Calgary. Of course, that being said, there are areas in Airdrie that are quite busy and densely populated, and there are areas in Calgary that are less populated. So this also depends where you are inside of each city. And this one, of course, is more of a personal preference than anything. Personally, I prefer a smaller city like Airdrie, but some people love the city life, and in that case, Calgary would be the better option. Alright, now moving on to our next category, which is amenities. Now, as you'd imagine, Airdrie and Calgary vary a lot in the amenities they provide due to the size of their populations. Now, of course, being the bigger city, Calgary has every single amenity that you could ever need for all of your shopping, dining, and entertainment. Of course, you're not going to be lacking in a place like Calgary. But in Airdrie, on the other hand, it might be missing some of the amenities that you'd enjoy, and you would need to drive to Calgary for those. For example, many of the entertainment options would be in Calgary instead of Airdrie, and though Airdrie has a lot of great restaurant options, there's still more in Calgary that you might want to explore. Of course, when we look at overall amenities, Calgary's going to win this one. Being the bigger city, naturally there's just more things to do, so you have to consider if you want those amenities right in your city, or if you'd prefer to live in a less populated city and drive to those extras in the big city. And speaking of driving to the amenities, that's going to bring us perfectly onto our next category, and that's the city area. Now, we're talking about the actual physical size of each city here, and naturally in relation to the population, Calgary covers the most area of the two cities. But why does that really matter to you? Well, the biggest thing that's going to affect is your driving time to different amenities within the city. Now, in Airdrie, no matter where you live in the city, you're going to be less than 15 minutes away from everything in the city, whereas in Calgary, you could be up to 45 minutes away from something in the city. Now, of course, that would be during non-rush hour times, and it can get a little bit longer in both cities during those busy times. But that's going to be the biggest difference you'll find with the area of the city. Now, in terms of walkability, Calgary in areas, of course, is very walkable to everything that you need, thinking more in the downtown neighborhoods here, but in other neighborhoods more on the outskirts of the city, it's not going to be really walkable at all. So within Calgary, you're going to get the full spectrum of walkability, whereas in Airdrie, everything is more or less kind of lands right in the middle area, reasonably walkable to most things, but maybe not to everything that you're going to need. And now on to one of the big factors that most people take into consideration between the two cities, and that's the cost of housing. And we're going to start with the average rental costs first, and then we'll move on to the sale prices. As for rentals, in Calgary right now for a one-bedroom condo, the average right now is going to be about $1,600 to $1,800 per month. Of course, being a big city, there's a huge variance in the cheapest to the most expensive, with the cheapest unit as of this recording being about $1,100 per month and the most expensive being about $5,000 per month. But the average is right in that $1,600 to $1,800 range. Now, in Airdrie, if you're looking at that one-bedroom apartment, your average is going to be about $1,500 to $1,700 on average, and there's going to be a lot less variance in this smaller city of Airdrie, so most of the units currently listed end up right within that $1,500 to $1,700 range. And moving on to two bedrooms, Calgary on average will be between $1,900 and $2,100, of course with many lower and many higher than that, and Airdrie on average is between $1,800 and $2,000 for those 2-bedroom units. And now moving on to 3 bedrooms, both cities actually average right around the $2,500 mark for 3 bedrooms, but in this category there's a large variance of homes, as we can see townhouses, condos, duplexes, and detached homes all mixed up in here and all have 3 bedrooms. So in Airdrie, we see a range from about $2,000 a month up to about $3,500 a month for 3 bedrooms. And in Calgary, that range can be anywhere from $2,000 all the way up to $10,000 per month for a luxury inner city home. And it's a similar story for the 4 bedrooms, both cities averaging about the same at about $3,000 per month. But in Airdrie, with fewer options, those 4 bedrooms are all really in that $3,000 range. And in Calgary, again, it's a big range, anywhere from $2,000 a month all the way up to $12,000 per month, depending on the home and the area you're in. Now overall, comparing the two, taking a similar home in a similar type neighborhood, an Airdrie rental would typically be a couple $100s per month cheaper than a similar property in Calgary. And now moving on to housing prices if you plan to buy, and here we're going to go through our 4 styles of properties and compare the overall benchmark price. Now keep in mind, again, there's a big price range in Calgary depending on location. So starting with apartments, Calgary's benchmark price is $289,600 compared to Airdrie's $233,400. For townhomes, Calgary's at $390,000 compared to Airdrie's $327,700. And moving on to duplexes, Calgary has a benchmark price of $600,500 versus Airdrie's benchmark price of $457,200. And lastly, if we look at detached home prices, Calgary's at a benchmark price of $674,000 compared to Airdrie, which is at $587,200. Now these spreads do seem pretty substantial, but keep in mind that there's a big pricing spread within the city of Calgary itself, and the inner city and super luxury properties tend to push Calgary's overall numbers up a bit higher than reality actually is. But again, comparing a similar home to a similar area in both cities, Airdrie will definitely be a bit cheaper to buy a home in. And now moving on to our next category, which also relates to housing costs, and that's taxes. Now, of course, federal and provincial taxes are going to be the same in both cities. So what we're mostly looking at here is property taxes. Now for Calgary, the total property tax rate currently is 0.65718%. And in Airdrie, the current total rate is 0.66978%. That is fairly typical to see higher property taxes in smaller cities and towns compared to the big cities, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. So now let's give these some real life scenarios and see how much you'd actually be spending for your property taxes in both cities. So for a home assessed at $300,000, in Calgary you'd pay $1,972, and in Airdrie you'd pay $2,009, which is about $37 more in Airdrie for the year. Now for a $500,000 home in Calgary, you're going to pay $3,286 compared to Airdrie, where you'd pay $3,349. And jumping up to $1 million home, in Calgary your taxes would be $6,572, and in Airdrie they would be $6,698 for the year. And now we're going to move on to our next category, which is the difference in location within the province. Now this one might seem kind of silly to you because you've probably seen the 2 cities on a map and you know that they're very close together. But even though they're close together, they each have advantages and disadvantages when it comes to location. Now first off, knowing that a lot of people travel often and like to be close to the airport, there are some neighborhoods in northeast Calgary that you're just going to be a few minutes away from the airport. So if that's important to you, that northeast Calgary might be the best spot for you. Now in Airdrie, you're going to be more like 20 to 25 minutes from the airport, but it's still the closest secondary city to the airport, and it's still closer than some areas of Calgary where you're going to be 30 to 40 minutes to get to the airport. And next, if we look at the proximity to the Rocky Mountains, Calgary definitely wins this one, especially if you're on the west side of Calgary. Here you could be as close as 40 minutes to those mountains compared to Airdrie, which will take you a little bit over an hour to get there. And in terms of access to the rest of the province, Airdrie probably wins this one. With the number 2 highway passing right through Airdrie, you can be in Calgary in just a few minutes or head up to Edmonton in just a couple hours. Now even though it's right outside of Calgary, Airdrie's in a good location to access many areas of the province fairly easily. And now for the last thing we're going to look at for both cities, and that's going to be the crime in both of these cities. Now for non-violent crimes specifically, Airdrie scores worse than Calgary does. This would be things like unlocked cars being rummaged through at night and other things like that, non-violent things. Now we often see this number higher in the smaller cities, as the non-violent crimes have a higher chance of being reported in the smaller cities versus the bigger cities. And as for violent crimes, both Calgary and Airdrie are more safe than the national average, which is always good to see, especially if you're coming from one of the cities that's worse on the national scale, like Vancouver or Toronto. Well, that about does it for our comparison of Airdrie versus Calgary. Go ahead and comment any points below that you'd like to add, either for or against either city. Again, my name is Brad Walker, local Alberta realtor with Real Broker, and please reach out anytime you're considering a move to Alberta. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.